I don't know about you, dear viewer, but despite the fact that Pokemon cards were a thing when I was a kid, it were Yu-Gi-Oh cards that actually ruled my school's playground. Pokemon still did rule the gaming space around that time, but when it came to collecting, Yu-Gi-Oh was definitely at the top. Maybe because Yu-Gi-Oh cards looked way cooler or something, but if you ask me, the main reason is the same as why the Pokemon games ruled the gaming space. It had a very strong connection to the anime that was airing around the same time. But unlike Pokemon, where the games resembles the anime closer than the card game, Yu-Gi-Oh's card game resembled the anime a lot closer and even was sold not as mere collectibles but as pieces from the anime itself, which was a very clever merchandise tactic that again worked really well. Believe it or not, back then we collected cards not for monetary value but because they just looked cool, were strong, or just wanted to complete a certain set of cards. You know, how card collecting used to work. The holy grail, of course, for many of us were the cards that were used by the main cast of characters in the anime. Another reason why the Yu-Gi-Oh games were less popular, or at least was less popular with us as kids, was that we were of an age that we didn't understand English, or at least too little to read a trap, spell or effect monster and understand them. So in other words, if the trap card wasn't played in the anime, we didn't know what it would do. Which in hindsight is kind of funny, cause anime trap cards are nothing like their real life counterparts. Another problem, and a more personal one, is that the games just didn't capture the magic Pokemon games did. It were just duels, no exploration, story, character development, or again, not a strong connection to the anime itself. Now, that's not to say that the anime was particularly good. Oh no, far from it. Yet, as a kid, but also now as an adult, I still can't get enough of it. Cause it's so bad that's actually good. Very fun and enjoyable to watch and indulge in. So I can't help myself but wonder, what if a Yu-Gi-Oh game would follow the anime? What if it allows you to make your dream deck and face off against your favorite characters, while you follow a story, maybe the story of the anime itself, where you get to play a role in or something? Well, that is where Yu-Gi-Oh! The Sacred Cards come in, a Yu-Gi-Oh! Game that basically promised exactly that. And when a friend of me told me that this game was on the list of games contained in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Early Days collection, I had to dive in and see for myself. Will it be a dream come true? Or is there a reason why this didn't get picked up back in the day? Well, there's only one way to find out. This is my review of Yu-Gi-Oh! The Sacred Cards. In Yu-Gi-Oh! The Sacred Cards, Seto Kaiba turns the city of Domino into one large playground for his next big duel tournament. As long as you have a duel disc, you can join in, which our character does. Throughout the tournament, it is our goal to make the perfect deck, obtain enough location cards to join the final, and of course to win the tournament. However, we are not alone in this goal. Big players like Yugi, May Valentine, and even Kaiba himself aim for the exact same goal, while others see the tournament as the perfect grounds for dark, evil schemes. In other words, so far so good for the Sacred Cards. The story follows the events of the Battle City arc, which comes directly from the anime and the manga of Yu-Gi-Oh!, though it's mostly the anime that it follows. Better yet, as we are the main character of this story, many known events and situations we have seen before with certain characters are now swapped with you. Meaning you don't just join in on the adventure, you experience it entirely on your own perspective. Which sounds great, however, it does not solve the biggest problem. As much as I love and enjoy Yu-Gi-Oh!, especially the Battle City arc, the problem still lies with the before mentioned fact that this story is not well written. Do not misunderstand, I love Yu-Gi-Oh!'s cheesy, bad writing, but it also hurts thinking what this story could have been if it was written more proper. I would even argue that this story here is weaker than the anime, cause if you haven't seen the anime, all the characters have no depth or development, and are more or less just cannon fodder for your own character's story, as you replace them in the moment that was originally their moment to grow and develop in. And what disappointed me even more is that there is no more story added next to what the anime already tells. While I would argue that a game like this is the perfect place to do more, not to replace and take away from what is already out there. Though one could argue that this design was on purpose. It's the ideal child fantasy, the mega fan wish of being the main character in a show you really like. And I would absolutely join this argument, because considering when this game was made, I believe that is what they were aiming for. Of course, it's not an excuse for bad design, but the least the game could do was be self-aware about its aims, which it definitely is. You can find traces of that all over the story, but also in its art style, which is absolutely fantastic. I might be a bit biased towards Game Boy graphics, but man are these Game Boy graphics at its finest while capturing the iconic Yu-Gi-Oh art style and somehow making all cards look like their real life counterparts and even recognizable when placed on a board. It's however a shame that outside of the main cast of characters and cards, not a lot more is done with this art style. Which is very wasteful to say the least, because when you look at other Game Boy games, you can clearly see in terms of animations and such that a lot more was possible, especially during the main aspect of these games, the duels. Yu-Gi-Oh is, as you can see, just a card game. Wrong, it's not just a card game. It was born in old Egypt decades ago and was played by multiple generations of Egyptian sorcerers that would battle to their death. Which, yeah, that's just lore. It's actually just a card game where two people duel each other, place monsters, use spells and trap cards to get the upper hand and to deal damage to each their life points until one reaches 0. And then one duelist has won and the other one, well, has lost. It's really that simple. However, in each game and anime, for that matter, there are some rules added or changed on top of the basic format, and even certain cards work differently in every iteration. Here the rules are that you have to tribute a monster when you want to play a monster with 5-star or higher, and if you lose the duel, you got to give your rarest card to the opponent. So far, pretty standard and faithful to the anime. There are some further gameplay choices which took me a while to adapt to, as it was quite different from other Yu-Gi-Oh games that I played, let alone the real life version of it. Usually a player turn is divided by phases which you progress through. The most important one to understand is that you have only one attacking phase, and only before or after that phase you are allowed to play more cards. But you are not allowed to attack anymore once your attack phase is ended. Very basic Yu-Gi-Oh, and if you have played it before, you are very familiar with this phase structure. Here, however, they got rid of that entire rule. Instead, you have full freedom what you can and will do in your turn. And personally, I like this a lot more than the whole phase structure, as it offers a lot more space to adapt to results of events during your turn. Did an attack not go as planned, you might as well play a different monster afterwards that can counter whatever has beaten your first monster. Now, normally an attack goes like this. Every monster has attack and defense points. Depending on the stance of the monster, it determines which number is used. If the attacking monster has a higher number than the defending one, it beats it. If a monster gets destroyed while in an attacking stance, the difference between the monster that is attacking and the one that is defending gets dealt to your life points. It's very straightforward and easy to understand. I mean, it's a kid's card game in the end. And while the anime banned some rules, it did teach the basics very well. However, I said normally, because here in the sacred cards they thought attacks shouldn't always go as you expect, and instead it would make things interesting to have an elemental system added on top of everything. This might be my favorite and most hated thing in the game. Here is a quick example how the elemental system impacts the game. Let's say you created your deck's boss monster by tributing 2, maybe even 3 monsters. You are dealing big damage to any monster and your opponent. There is no equal on this battlefield. Except for that one little hidden monster with just a puny little attack of 500. But it has the opposite element of your boss monster. and therefore, no matter its attack value, will delete your strongest monster in an instance. This is why it's good that there's no phase structure to a duel, because this elemental thing happens quite often, and if you can't adapt quickly to what the enemy throws at you, then I would argue that this duel system wouldn't really work, as it would be completely out of balance. So yeah, it's good that you can make quick adjustments, and it's good that this element system is here, because it really makes some duels fun, as it can be completely turned upside down in an instance. It's also bad because I get very salty seeing my biggest monster being deleted by some puny ass creature. But it also works in your favor, and then, well, then it's amazing. Absolutely brilliant. But despite its fun, quirky, almost RNG aspect to it all, the game struggles with one main thing, and that is balancing. All the people you see in the world can be dueled. Again, the entire city is the stage of this tournament. Beating these people is of course your goal. Through them you gain experience with the dueling itself and perfect your deck via winning new cards and ironing out the flaws that can only appear while dueling. Via winning duels you also earn money to buy new cards and increase your duelist level and deck capacity. The latter one is basically a limiter on your deck, so you can't instantly make the best possible deck, as each card has its own value that needs to fit in the total of your deck capacity. Of course, the better the card, the higher its value towards deck capacity is. But to be fair, even with that limit, I felt overpowered for most of the time throughout the entire playthrough. Barely any duelist uses a spell or trap card, which are very powerful as they can easily tip the skill in your favor. The final few duelists that you face in the game will use spell or trap cards, but at that point my deck was too strong to be held back by them. It did make the duels more interesting to be fair, and even during my playthrough I did get into some tough situations. But in the end it still felt very tame, especially when you compare it to other Yu-Gi-Oh games. Now, if the story mode was a lead up to the difficulty the last duel formed, so that you can naturally be introduced to the end game and the higher levels of difficulty you can find there, I would have no problem with this. It only roughly took 7 hours to get through the entire story, so I'm willing to consider this as a very long tutorial. But once the game ends, it just ends. You even have to turn off the game when the last credits scene is shown, which is as retro gaming as it can get, and it's kind of funny and I like it, but ultimately it does mean the death of your game in a very brutal way. No difficulty opponents after this, no more deck building, and no other different game modes or something like that to explore. I mean, the game has the nerve to give you the Winged Dragon of Ra, a god card, at the end, only to never be able to use it. That Yu-Gi-Oh! The Sacred Cards does not have any form of endgame is something I really don't understand. This is a card game, it should be designed to be played indefinitely once you completed it. And what is weirder is that this game came out only months before Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire. And there we do have some forms of endgame, even if it's just mindlessly leveling up your Pokemon. And I would have loved to mindlessly shape my deck further in this game. I actually did that for fun, but I couldn't face more difficult opponents, so the satisfaction of that was very low. If there was just some mode where you face randomly against stronger characters or created decks, I would have been completely fine, but unfortunately none of that is here. But in the sequel they did try to make it more interesting than it is here. And I could tell you about it. And I will. That's right, it's a bonus review of Yu-Gi-Oh! Rashef of Destruction. The sequel continues building on top of the foundation that the Sacred Cards has laid. However, what it builds on top of it is not that much of a difference than what I already told about the Sacred Cards. So I felt like I would just add it here on top of this review as a bonus instead of cheapening my upload schedule. The biggest change right off the bat are these amazing Game Boy style cutscenes. They show off some really cool artwork of Yu-Gi-Oh! That throughout the story keeps popping up. We even get to see monsters being summoned on the world map and use their special attacks to give the idea that other duelists are actually dueling. And better yet, they seem to have listened to the critique people gave about the Sacred Cards being too easy. Where the difficulty curve was non-existing in the sacred cards, here in Reshev of Destruction, they decided to start the curve at the very top of the graph and then break said graph by going beyond its limits. This game is not just difficult, it's stacked against you at every turn possible. Now, in the previous game, you would gain cards by winning duels, and these cards would improve your deck greatly so that you can face the tougher challenges ahead in the story. Here they also give you cards for winning duels, but they are always worse than you already have in your deck. And what is in your deck is freaking trash, so after a long hard fought battle where you have to risk one of your cards, by the way, you are rewarded with nothing. And money doesn't solve this problem either, because you gain only pennies beating an opponent, and let's say you grind enough to get a card you want, your deck limit probably will stop you from using it, as gaining points for your deck limit is stupidly slow. After the initial first hour of the game, you will get stuck at the first challenge you meet. They have cards that you can barely put up a fight against, and getting to a similar level as the opponent will take you hours of grinding in the hopes that you get a better card. Now, at first I thought this grind would be a fun challenge. I mean, yeah, giving 4 hours or so to get past the first hurdle, but then getting to experience a fun Yu-Gi-Oh game with an interesting story and decent fun challenging duels sounds like worth my time. But after those 4 hours, I was barely closer getting over that hurdle. The manual even states that the higher level the cards you wager in a duel, the bigger your chances to get a good monster in return, but that's just false. I was getting junk endlessly no matter what I was wagering, and I truly started to believe that my chances were higher to pull the entire Exodia set from the top of my deck at turn 1 than getting a remotely good card from any battle. The main problem here is, however, that I really wanted to witness this game's story. It looked so interesting at the start. The game continues right after the sacred cards has ended. Everything seems good and great as the Battle City tournament has ended and everybody went back to their normal lives. But then Yugioh appears telling that all the Millennium items have disappeared, that the god cards turned into stone, and that Reshev, the dark being, is awakening and will destroy the entire world if we, a couple of teenagers playing cards, don't stop him. This leads to a story where we travel across the world searching for the Millennium items so that we can free the god cards and use them to beat Reshev and save the entire world. Yes, if you think about the plot for 2 seconds, it's insane for the world it's set in. But this insanity is what I absolutely love of Yu-Gi-Oh! The question is, however, is the story worth pushing through the 5, 10, 20 hours of unfair grinding at the start? I would imagine for a few that did push through it, that it truly was a reward, as it's the only reward you will gain from doing this. But in general, I would say it's not worth your time grinding through it, because you will gain so little for it. The story still is in the end a Yu-Gi-Oh story, so just like in the previous game, it's very cheesy, surface level, not a lot of development of characters or really any thought out plotline. And maybe even worse, it's even cheap in certain aspects. In this story, it mostly boils down to traveling across the world, which is just one small place where you fight a couple of duels, get the Millennium item you are sent to collect, and then continue to the next country until you collect all the Millennium items and fight the main villain at the end. Thankfully, I found a way around it, a better way to enjoy this game's story while having a fair amount of difficulty. The Early Days collection comes with an enhancement mode for the game, where you can add all cards to your collection and remove deck capacity, for example. Yes, that sounds overpowered, but I created some rules for myself that surprisingly kept the game challenging and therefore quite fun. Rule number 1 is that you get only access to 1 copy of each card. And rule number 2 is that the deck limit will not be removed, meaning you have to make your deck work with all these cards in a set limit. Which is much harder than expected, but after a couple of tweaks and duels, I did get to the point where the game got balanced. Duels were still more or less difficult than in the sequel, but felt more manageable than they were without the enhancements. Near the end of the game, the balance does disappear, and at that point I would say drop all the self-made rules and just go for unlimited cards and deck limit to create the best deck you want. I mean, if they can do ass pulls, then why can't we, right? Now, I might sound very excited that I managed to make it work and got to experience the game despite its difficulty. But honestly, I really dislike the fact that they went from one extreme on the spectrum to another one, which was very unnecessary. The first game was actually so close on being good. All it needed was some difficulty tuning and endgame. Somehow that translated to unfair, insane levels of difficulty, making an interesting game with a unique story be locked away for barely anyone to witness. On top of that, the endgame is still missing, so on that end, the most important aspect wasn't fixed. This leads me back to a conclusion I have for a long time now. Difficulty doesn't make a game for me. It can make it interesting and rewarding, but in the end, I want a story. Characters, gameplay that combines it all into a fun time. While I wish it was more difficult, I would pick the sacred cards over Reshef of the Destruction any day, and I would recommend you to do so as well. It's good to know that it is possible to play Reshef of Destruction without the grind, but it's such a hassle that it's overshadowed the fun for me. While the sacred cards was definitely easy, it was overall a better time. Even after I completed it, I went back just to fool around with my deck, trying to perfect it. While with Reshef, I just put Chrono down when the story was done, glad it was over and that I didn't need to go back to it ever again. And that's not how I want to end the game. The sacred cards I just left a lot better. It was a sweet and short 7-hour experience of a story that again was a fan dream come true. Be that a very weak version of that dream. A very, very weak version at that. But it was still a lot of fun and very cheesy as you would expect from Yugioh. But it also had its peak moments of nice Game Boy style graphics or interesting situations during duels. And that is honestly what I seek from a Yugioh game. And if you seek that as well, I highly recommend checking out the early day collection for the sacred cards. And while you're at it, maybe even check out Reshef of Destruction. Maybe you're one of the very few that actually enjoys this brutal style of difficulty. It's at least fun to check out and see how far you can stomach it, because that's actually a fun challenge as well.